Aditya, do we have a banner? If you can share that, it would be great on the background.
Right. Yes.
Yes. Aditya, good to go?
Yes. Yes. I'll
Yes.
just
Am I audible?
put that. You are.
Great. Wonderful. Okay. Good to know.
Yeah. Just trying to share my screen. Hope you can see my screen.
Yes.
Yes. So, good evening, everyone. Good evening to our audience in India and to our panelists in the US. And I hope everyone is staying safe and healthy. I am Aditya. I'm the chair of the IEEE student branch. And on behalf of IEEE Women in Engineering Affinity Group Bangalore section, the IEEE IISc WiSE Affinity Group at IISc, and the WIE Women in Engineering Affinity Group at Canara Engineering College, I welcome all of you to this Engineers Day celebration that we're having today. And our panelists for the day, for the evening, are Anu Jayaraman and Chitra Venkatraman. And we will introduce the panelists to you shortly. So without further ado, I would invite Anandi ma'am, who is the IEEE Women in Engineering Affinity Group Bangalore section chair and also the branch counselor of the IEEE IC student branch, to welcome our audience and our panelists for the day.
Thank you. Thank you, Aditya.
Thank you.
Very good evening to everyone and a happy Engineers Day to all. First and foremost, we would like to welcome and extend our thanks to our eminent speakers, Ms. Anu Jayaraman from Global Telecom, and she's also a supply chain consultant. And we have with us IEEE senior member from North Jersey section, Ms. Chitra Venkatraman with us. Both are senior women engineers, will be conversing on their career journeys and their societal impact on this Engineers Day. We are honored to have you both, ma'am. Welcome. Over to Ashwini.
Thank you, madam. It's
Yes.
wonderful to see you all over here today on the occasion of Engineers Day. So in India, Engineers Day on September 15th is an observance day as a tribute to Mokshagundam Vishweshwaraya, reminiscing his contributions. One of the greatest engineers time has seen. Vishweshwaraya's enormous contributions and innovations in the field of engineering, industry, and development of society has been unparalleled to the state. So with this backdrop, I call upon Miss Verdine Narona, Women in Engineering Committee at Canada Engineering College, to kindly introduce us to today's guests. Without further ado, calling upon Ms. Verdine Narona.
Good evening, one and all. Greetings to each and everyone on the occasion of Engineers Day. It's my pleasure to introduce to you our eminent speakers for today. Ms. Chitra Venkatraman recently retired after a 4-decade-long career as a technical manager at Nokia in Murray Hill, New Jersey. She has a BE in Electrical Engineering from University of Madras and Masters in Science in Electrical Engineering from Rutgers University. She retired after 4 decades-long career in the telecom industry at Bell Labs Development, which is currently Nokia Bell Labs. She is one of the early cellular system pioneers. Under her leadership, her team covered all the technologies from analog, CDMA, TDMA, UMTS, and LTE. She worked extensively with wireless service providers from around the world, including Tata and Reliance India. Chitra is a senior member of the IEEE, currently serving as the IEEE North Jersey Section's Employment and Career Services, Pre-University and WIE Chair. She represents IEEE at various STEM events around New Jersey. Since her retirement in 2018, Chitra has been pursuing her passion of volunteering in humanitarian services and STEM fields in various organizations. American Red Cross Disaster Services, mentoring at the Students to Science organization, corporate mentoring at NCIT Society of Women Engineers, and a volunteer STEM mentor at the Liberty Sands Center. Welcome you, ma'am. Ms. Anu Jayaraman started her own consulting business after working for more than 30 years at Honeywell, USA. She has a BE in Electrical Engineering from University Visvesvaraya College of Engineering and Masters in Business Administration and Manufacturing from University of St. Thomas, Minnesota. In her 35 years of experience, she has been involved in multiple disciplines spanning IT, supply chain, alliance management, engineering, and manufacturing. She was involved in the design of navigation systems for business jets, was part of the team that was in the forefront of just-in-time manufacturing for complex aerospace systems, designed and developed electronic controls for gas valves, and then switched to alliance management and supply chain management. She then moved into a whole new field by becoming a service owner for telecommunications, including voice and network engineering, negotiating global contracts with carriers like Reliance, NTT, AT&T, Verizon, etc. This varied and broad background has provided the foundation for a telecom and supply chain consultancy. Anu is an ITIL lifecycle expert, Agile Scrum Master, and Six Sigma Green Belt. Throughout her career, she has served as a mentor and volunteered in Industry Volunteers Encouraging Science and Technology, ARC, community nonprofit organizations that serve people with disabilities, battered women's shelters, etc. She is passionate about speaking up for those who cannot speak for themselves. We are indeed privileged to have proficient personalities to share their experiences. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you very much for those kind introductions. I just wanted to say that I did notice something, Chitra. You're wearing bling on your around your neck, which I never ever see in all the years that I've known you. So,
and you want to know what's with that, right?
yes.
And well, there is a little. It's actually a prop for my concluding remarks today. So I'm going to defer talking about my little bling, and just so it may not come through as very clearly, but it is orange, green, and white. And maybe that gives a clue, but I will talk about it later. So we are on now?
Yeah, I think so.
Oh, okay.
To that,
well,
that
I just
fancy
wanted
introduction.
To quickly, the introduction, all the people that gave us the introduction. I appreciate that.
Okay.
Okay.
So Chitra, can I get started about my career?
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead and
okay. So you'll notice quite a difference between the two of us in the sense that while we are both underlying, we have engineering in common, it's quite interesting what each person makes of our engineering career paths. I started out as an electrical engineer and joined, as first as a, test engineer, moved on to doing some design work. But I really wanted to explore, and I got the opportunity to do so. Some of it was deliberate on my part, some of it I fell into it, but there is a saying that says that opportunity is what you make of it, and that has kind of been the story of my career. So I started out in aerospace in Honeywell, but I've also worked in Honeywell's building controls and home controls business. I've been involved in their specialty materials business. So my career has spanned not just different engineering disciplines, but very different, diverse businesses as well. And still stayed for the bulk of my career in Honeywell, although I did do several stints outside. I was also involved in a medical device company And so you can really see what a diverse path one can take with just a basic electrical engineering degree. So like I said, I started out with, in the aerospace. I worked on as a test engineer, moved on to do some design work. And one of the things that intrigued me was that while you are a good, you could be a good designer and design navigation systems and complex navigation systems for airplanes, how do you build it so that you have very little waste, and how do you build it so that the testing and the amount of work that rework, prevent a lot of the rework. So I asked for and got into a special assignment so that I could go over. And this at the time when being a design engineer was the privilege, and was like, a higher status, if you were to think. And to go ask to become a production engineer seemed, just something that the leadership was like, why do you want to go be a production engineer? But I said, no, 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 I'll be a better designer once I know how the production system works. So I moved into production engineering, did that whole just-in-time manufacturing for complex things, which was very interesting. And this was all in the late 80s, early 90s, when we were doing all of this. And then moved on to do some other work in building controls. Wanted to learn more about process engineering, learned how to set up. And in the meantime, I had worked at nights, went to school to get my MBA, and I minored in manufacturing because I really wanted to understand what the difference was. And then, had two children along the way. And then continued on and did process engineering, put entire lines together, outsourced contract manufacturing, designed things that would go into it, designed, circuit boards. So it did a plethora of different things. And then went back to aerospace, but this time as a systems engineer, and then got tapped in the shoulder to do something called alliance engineering, which was a very new concept, wherein, at the time Honeywell was looking into, hey, we have products that fill, some parts of the cockpit and some parts of the navigation systems, but we don't own everything. And they wanted to be able to bid and win against people like Rockwell Collins and other aerospace companies that had, a broader base of products to sell. And, the more you can own a cockpit, the better off you are. So we went and found small engineering firms all over the globe. I found one in a small town called Saskatoon, Canada, and in a small town in France, and found these engineering firms that had products that would fit perfectly. We said, you develop it, we'll help you market it, and we'll, so we create alliances. And so these were engineering alliances, and that's kind of how I fell into the, what I call soft procurement supply chain part of it, and segued in. Honeywell got bought out by Allied Signal. We had to move from Minnesota to New Jersey. So then I fell into a whole new world and stepped into becoming what I call a procurement supply chain specialist. Learned all about IT. Until then, I'd been in the pure engineering fields. So learned about networking, telecom, and then became a telecom expert, and went out and did in the forefront of networking engineering, went from the old models to MPLS and to the newer models and all of those things. So completely different from where I started out is in aerospace, and after that very interesting career, they asked me to move once again. It was just very difficult to move. And so I decided I would end my 30 plus year career in Honeywell and started my own consulting firm, trying to put all this, background to use. So now I do consulting around, SAP, around not software, but about procuring things like SAP and, any other IT software or hardware and things like that. So that's my story in a nutshell.
So Anu, I think after that description, I think I'm going to skip mine
No.
because very different. So I came out of Madras Engineering College, CEG, and with my power engineering, all power background. And as soon as I graduated, I knew I need to get away from power. So when I landed in Buffalo, New York, after getting married and trying to settle in, I went to college there, University of, it was called SUNY Buffalo. And it was, so by this time I was big with biomedical engineering. That was my dream position, but there was nothing there. So I kind of thought maybe I'll take a job and defer my master's until I get an opportunity to do biomedical. So I went to work for Union Carbide, but nothing was looking very promising. So I started getting interested in microprocessor world. But suddenly we had to move out of Buffalo in a couple of years, and we came to New Jersey. It was at that time I was feeling restless, and I said, if I don't get some degree in this country, I will be left out. So I went to full-time school at Rutgers University in New Jersey, and I got my master's. And once again, I really was after that biomedical engineering, which I was a little slightly ahead of its time from a lot of opportunities and curriculum and stuff. So interestingly, just to get through my master's, once again, I got roped into power. This power just was like a leech on me, it just wouldn't let me go. And then I got a job at Bell Labs. It was literally if you're in New Jersey, you can't decline a position with the famous Bell Labs. So I accepted, except in Bell Labs, they give you a job, but they don't even tell you what you're going to do there. Only on the day you arrive, they tell you which organization you're going to land in. It was a kind of a strange place. I ended up, guess what? Power Lab, power systems engineering, central office power. And I was ready to pull my hair out. And I said, okay, now what? And it took me another, I don't know, about 2 or 3 years to really find out and make friends and smile a lot and butter up people and try to move myself into microprocessor area. And I did that about the mid 80s. From then on, I kind of stayed out of power, thankfully. Of course, 35 years later, Apple called me one day and they said they wanted me to consider a job for designing power for Apple products. And I said, hey, even when I worked on power, I didn't know much about it. And after 35 years, I have no clue. So finally moving on, and I worked in some of the central office control area, which is a lot of the microprocessors were just getting introduced. But then the axe came and our organization moved to Texas, and I had to make a decision. That's when I entered wireless, and wireless was just getting started. There were less than a couple of hundred people working on wireless. Our first product, wireless base station, was go on first office application when I just got into wireless. So I had an amazing 30-year ride with wireless until the entire wireless organization based out of Murray Hill, Bell Labs, New Jersey, was pretty much brought down to, I guess I've heard, maybe 50 people. So 2018, when my career ended, I would probably say involuntarily, sort of, because I just jumped with joy when they told me that I'm going to be let go. My whole organization is going to be ending because I was ready for other things. So I jumped out of that bandwagon and dove right into a lot of the volunteer work. So we talked about how our careers kind of went back and forth on, it kind of wiggled around and traveled in a very, very complex paths. Mine in the same place, yours in I guess in the same company also. So my question, I know you for about 25 years, and we're kind of different people. I'm a bit of a sports nut, and if I don't play some sports on any given day, my life is not normal. I kind of, people might see me a natural fit for engineering, especially back then. Now, I would have never looked at you in a setting that I didn't know you and say, I bet she's an engineer. So I'm curious, what was it that propelled you into engineering?
Actually, art and artistic endeavors were very something that I really loved. But so architecture was really my first love, and I had really wanted to get into architectural engineering, because I felt that it blended both the engineering, because science and technology were easy, and it came, math and science was what I wanted to do. The whole concept of doing economics or anything else just did not appeal. So architectural engineering was something that, what I wanted. I applied to Bangalore University, got into architectural engineering, but of all the places, those of you who are in Karnataka, as you know, when you get a seat, I was assigned a seat in architecture, but the place was in Davangere, and back then in Davangere, there were no women's hostels. There was a handful of places where they took women as paying guests. And when my mother took me to Davangere, we took a bus and went there, and we could not find a place for me to stay. And so my mother was like, no, I'm not leaving my 17-year-old daughter in this place, figuring out how she's going to go to school, to college. So she said, nope, you're coming right back to Bangalore. So we came back and went back to the university, Bangalore University, and asked to see if we could get a transfer. And my mother was very insistent, and my father at the time was out of the country, and so she was like, no, my daughter cannot be in thing. I'm fine if you go up with her going to Davangere, but find me a place for her to stay that's safe. And that poor man who didn't have an answer. And a lot of you, I'm sure, are smiling because you can picture your parents doing this, right? And so he said, well, the only thing left is I have one seat available in UVC for electrical engineering. My mother said she will take it. And that's how I ended up in electrical engineering. So Chitra, when I think of you, right, I think of gadgets. So I'm not surprised that you're an engineer because of your love of gadgets. So tell me about how you got started.
And there's one. And I use this to remove all the dirt from the laptop. That was one of my latest acquirement. This is like if I do it around the keyboard and all the junk that fell into the keyboard comes out. So there it is. I'll get it ready for your son's birthday for a gift.
There you go.
So it's kind of interesting. Yes, we grew up with a father who was a tinkerer. He could figure out anything, fix anything, figure out how anything works. It was kind of in the background, but I had an interesting start in terms of my studies. I was a very unique child who had absolutely no interest in answering exam questions. So I would actually go to school, I learn everything, but then when they give the exam, I'll actually hand back in the entire exam unanswered. And sometimes the teacher will be shocked because they knew I knew stuff, and they'll ask me, and I won't even have an answer. I am not interested. I had, it took me several years to really figure out, well, go to school, you have to take tests and you have to pass them, right? And a big turnaround for me came in 1964, April. When we finished with school, we were going to uh, open a Vivekananda statue on campus, and Jawaharlal Nehru was going to come to open it. Of all the kids in the school, there are 7 of us that were picked to dance in front of Nehru, greeting him. I mean, in those days, I'm not sure now, but in the 60s, if you are a fourth standard student and you're going to dance in front of Jawaharlal Nehru, you accomplish your life's goal. And I was so thrilled, came home, told my parents we have to get a green silk skirt, the long, so I don't know, in Canada, what do you say for pattu pavadai? I don't know. Okay, so whatever. I know people know what this is. So
Uddalanga.
what's that?
Uddalanga.
Uddalanga. Okay. So that night, I heard my parents talk about trying, I was about to sleep and they didn't know I was not asleep. And I overheard them talking about trying to find that much money in the middle of that time period to buy that skirt. And I was terrified because that's going to break my deal being able to dance. I think it planted a seed. There was almost an instantaneous click in my head that said, I'm not going to grow up poor. I'm not going to go up there and be financially independent. So I think it kind of pushed me in that direction. And then for sure, I was going to medicine, but I did something very naughty. In the senior 11th grade, 11th standard or 10th standard, I once went and took our biology teacher's chair for a drama practice without getting her permission. When I got back, all the girls were talking about it. I said, Chitra, you wait till you see Saroja teacher. You are in a truckload of trouble. I'm being very decent here. So I instantly decided I am not going to pursue medicine because I have to make friends with Sarabja teacher. So it's kind of weird how all kinds of little things in life kind of pushes you around. So I went into math class, and amazingly, we had this extraordinary teacher who kind of just showed me how beautiful math was. Until then, I don't think I ever realized there was beauty in math and got very obsessed. So I went around and I wandered around wanting to do astronomy. Bam, no. As a matter of fact, I wanted to do architecture myself. For some reason, my parents didn't want me to do architecture. But engineering, well, finally, I made them a promise. I will accept arranged marriage and I will not find my partner in the engineering college. And then they let me go to engineering school because they were terrified I was going to meet somebody and marry. And in the 60s, that was not a cool thing. So I kind of took a little different path. And so I know when you went to engineering and doing your engineering curriculum and stuff, were you aware of, I'm getting into something that is going to reach out to the community?
I don't know that the awareness was overt, but definitely the fact that engineers have an impact was always there for me because my father was a civil engineer, and I saw time and time again. I mean, at the time when I was growing up, I'd see him, designing and calculating how much steel should go into construction and things like that. And then at the time, in fact, I have a vivid memory of Kirloskar factory. They were building an extension, and the extension fell down because whoever that engineer was at the time had not really calculated the weight of the second story. The whole thing collapsed. Luckily, no one was killed, but there was a lot of damage and a lot of people injured. And so my father was one of the engineers who was contacted and asked to help, recalculate, do the right things. And I saw what a difference it made and how much, if you're not careful, right, what kind of an impact you could have on something. And so I think that was there. Like I said, it was more intrinsic and given rather than an overt way. But yeah, the impacting society was definitely there. But for you, I think you wanted to definitely build things for for the betterment of society. That's kind of how I look at you. So
I know, but it kind of yes and no. Well, when I went to college, honestly, for the first 2 years, I have to be very open about it that I struggled a lot because for one thing, I studied in my own language, Tamil medium, and I really struggled how to express my thoughts, my answers in the exams and stuff in English. It took me quite a bit of time to make the transition. And then I also struggled with how to study for college because I was one of those crazy kids who never really studied. I basically went to school to play sports, climb trees, get into trouble. And somewhere along the way, I would make sure I got the best grade I could get. So when I got to college, a lot of that changed and you really had to be on your toes. But it wasn't until about fourth year I suddenly started to get a passion. And again, it went back to my medical dream that I never got to achieve. So I started to get into this again. Biomedical was my big thing. There was nobody doing biomedical in my college, but next door, AC Tech, there was one professor who was all into biomedical, and he couldn't get enough students in AC Tech to work with him. So a few of us actually became almost like a adjunct students at AC Tech. And I just wanted to say there was one project that really sticks in my mind. It was, in India has a lot of leprosy, especially back then. There was quite a lot. And every Thursday we would see them around on the streets, and they would look quite a bit bruised in their legs. And that was because their legs would bang against things, because then their nerve endings have died, and they wouldn't feel when they hit something, and they will get bruised. So he had this thing he cooked up that we were all kind of trying to design, where when these leopards wear this prosthetic, it'll automatically lift the front of their foot forward so that they don't bang into things. I mean, the idea of how engineering could impact society and solve some really hardcore medical problems. I think that again was getting deeper into my head, and I was really focusing. I was definitely dreaming at that time. I think there was a biomedical engineering company either starting or established in Bangalore. Oh, I was just in my head. That's what I was doing. I was going to graduate, and that's where I was going to go. But it really kind of didn't go that way. And this professor at AC Tech was, I would have to say, my inspiration on how engineering, really is out there serving the community. So speaking of inspiration, you touched a little bit on your father. So I want to say a little bit about where my inspiration came from. It really primarily from my father, who tinkered with a lot of stuff, as I said. But I wanted to make this one other observation, that when I was growing up, my oldest brother was in engineering college, and he had a bunch of women engineer and students who went to school with him. They would come home, and I get to know them very well. I don't think I, overtly thought about them. But interestingly, years and years later, just a year ago, I read Shanta Mohan's book, Roots and Wings, that is about women engineers. And everybody, I tell you, everybody on this bridge, you got to go find that book, get a copy for yourself, because it talked about how women started to go into engineering in India. And I saw these women that I knew, my brother's classmates, featured, like Babai and Prabhavati. And I just, I was like, wait a minute, they are the ones who inspired me without even saying a word to me, because that's when I found out, hey, you can be a girl and be an engineer. Because until then, you have to remember 1972, there were not a lot of women around that were engineers in your family. As a matter of fact, hardly any of the women went to professional fields other than medicine. So I have to say, interestingly, people who inspired me never even said much to me, other than when they came to my house and they'll say a few words, get me a cup of water. That's about all I probably interacted with them. So, and so tell me about your father.
So it again, there were no, hey, this is what an engineer does or anything, but it was in the everyday things that we were doing, right? The impact that, my father had when he would be doing some interesting drafting work, calculating, how much steel goes into a beam or something like that. Or the fact that on the way back from school, we used to pass Sir C.V. Raman's house all the time. That's kind of how, and he had a very big compound. And his widow still lived in that place. And of course, I got into trouble one time because, we threw some stones to try and get some of the huli, the little thing from the tamarind tree, because it was tamarind season. And then a bunch of us got pulled in by the gardener, and I had to go, with shaking boots to meet with Mrs. Raman. But she was, very kind and started asking questions. And I somehow just took a liking to her. And she started talking about, how it's important to, for girls to do more, and you shouldn't just follow the other things. You should follow your own path. And I think she had a big impact on me. I met her maybe a half a dozen times at most, every now and then she moved on. But then growing up in Bangalore, going to KR Sagar Dam, looking at all of those things, and then and eventually, obviously, I got into engineering and to UVC, and see the college that was named after Vishwesvaraya, who did the KR Sagar Dam. So all of those things were what I call hidden inspirations that you didn't realize had an impact till you go back and reflect on it.
Exactly. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, let's talk about, hey, you've been involved in the development of wireless products from the start. Lots of things, this has transformed our lives quite a bit. So do you think all of it is positive? I mean, sometimes I wonder when I see, babies with gadgets.
Yeah. Yeah. Overall, if you think about it, over 100 years of telecom, right? Since Alexander Graham Bell, and no question, it brought the world together. I'm not sure you and I would be here today without this internationally, how everybody is connected. And then on top of that, the company I was with had so many inventions like MRIs and movie cameras and transistors, and in acoustics area is huge. Inventions that happened at Bell Labs that I would even give everybody a name, Jim West. If you want to be inspired, just go to Google and say Jim West, acoustics specialist, and read all about him. The wireless then again was another phenomenon that started in the 80s. But here was my difficulty. As on the one hand, wireless was exploding and people were connecting. But along came this distracted driving. As a matter of fact, you and I are tightly connected by this loss of little Nikhil Badlani, who was just 11 years old when a distracted woman who was on her phone came head on with a T collision on their van. And poor Nikhil just died. I mean, imagine losing your 11-year-old. I don't think any mother or father anywhere in the world can survive this. But the parents have gone on to create a huge foundation. And this Sunday, once again, like I've done in all these years, I am going to be running the 5K race in the memory of Nikhil Badlani, and reminding everybody not to text and drive. So 1.6 million crashes that are related to cell phones every year, and just in the United States. Don't even go to other countries yet. And there are over 3,000 deaths, all related to people driving and texting or talking. So it's a little mixed. But at the same time, when I went to Africa, I made several trips to Africa, 6 or 7 times through a volunteer mission. I was one of the people going to talk to these women about technology and cell phones. I land there, every one of them have a cell phone. And when I went to Africa, that opened my eyes about what cellular industry has done to countries like Africa, where there is almost the wireline structure is almost non-existent. So it is mixed, but I would probably say on the overall, it's a favorable. We don't even know, actually, if you think about it, right? Statistics on how many lives were saved because of telecom and wireless, and between all the medical stuff and somebody reaching out for help just in time. So they were saved when they're out in the middle of nowhere. So, I really think that's kind of my take on wireless. But when I think about Honeywell, and I'm thinking about safety products and wide, especially, I tell you, I am actually, by the way, in full compliance with all the SEC requirements. I am an investor in Honeywell. As after I found out Anu was working there, I made sure I went and put some money into Honeywell. They are known for these life-saving devices. As a Red Cross volunteer who heads out to places, homes that have been burned down, I am very, very familiar with the smoke detectors and stuff. So tell us more about their products and how all their product line impacted the world around.
I mean, I actually interesting because I started out in the aerospace business of Honeywell. Really, the very first thing is in navigation. Way back when, when flight took off, right? We actually used to have, there'd be a pilot, but there would be a navigator sitting next to them. And they'd have actually a little bubble, glass, bubble on the roof of the plane that allowed the navigator to navigate the plane by using stars. Okay, no different than how uh, the ships used to navigate by the stars and the thing, and they would use a sextant and do all of those things. And along came these engineers who came up with this whole concept of a ring laser gyro, which would do that same navigation on the X, Y, and Z axis without having to rely on stars. And years later, I met a navigator who, when he found out that I worked for Honeywell in aerospace, he said, you put me out of work. He worked for Air India as a navigator, and he was the last of the navigators and retired after Honeywell's products came out to the market. So yeah, I think that had a huge impact. I mean, being able to do all of those things. So obviously, in the flight part, in the whole aerospace side, Honeywell has huge products. In the other product, the term Honeywell, at least in the United States, originally started with a Honeywell heating and regulator company, and it started out in Minneapolis as a small engineering firm by Mark Honeywell, who designed basically thermostats and controls to so that the homes could be heated well. Because if anyone knows anything about Midwest and northern U.S., it gets super cold, very cold, very windy, and lots of snow and ice, and you want your homes to be heated. So I felt like everything that they do, lots of things impact you on a day-to-day life, makes your life better, right? Obviously in the whole specialty material side, they've come up with the material that goes into, it's the fiber that goes into Kevlar vest that protects police and others from bullets, and that's huge, right? In the army and everything. So you think about it, but I also think about not just Honeywell. I mean, I worked for Becton Dickinson and Company. It's a medical device company that they make everything from syringes to all kinds of things. And one of the innovations that we were working on and was a way to get insulin into little children who have, whatever reason, have diabetes or, childhood diabetes. And imagine trying to poke them or having these daily insulin injections. So they came up with this distributed, what looked like a little tiny little pincushion, but that could distribute the insulin by just scraping the surface of the skin just gently. It's almost like think of it as a rough cloth, but it really was tiny little needles dispensing medicine. Oh, wow. So, I mean, these to me are like some of the remarkable things that I've had the privilege of being part of. And, so I think, of those roles. So, but when I think of, what your involvement is, and then think about gadgets and things like that, is there some particular gadget you want to talk about?
Well, guess what I have here? I don't know if you guys can see it. A long time ago, not too long ago actually, when you guys came to my house, your husband looked at a Honeywell air cleaner in my house. Yes. And he looked at me. I said, Chitra, you are a cousin of a Honeywell employee, and it's embarrassing that you're using an outdated, ancient air cleaner, and you need to get rid of it right now and get yourself a new air cleaner. Well, I listened to him, and I did. But you know what I did as a gadget geek that I am? I kept the extra filters that I had bought for my air cleaner, because filters are interesting products that as a gadget geek, you never know when I'm going to need my filters for doing some little project. So I have a little Honeywell right in my house, probably have a bunch more that I can't even think of. we need to talk a little bit. I think there is a request on the chat and stuff about our volunteer work.
Yes.
So let me give a little bit about my volunteering work, that where it actually came from. Now we are looking at 9:46. I wanted to take a quick stop here. Aditya or Ashwini, what do you guys think? We just have a couple of more segments. We should continue.
Yes, please. Go ahead.
Okay, thanks. As I mentioned already before, my father actually did more volunteering than earn money for us. It's, enormous amount of his time. He just couldn't resist himself. There was a time, I think we calculated, he was involved in 21 different volunteer activities. Some of the things that I see my parallel is I also volunteered all the way from college days, school days. Actually, one time I got caught in a Kilpak mental hospital because I went through the back door without signing, and I got stuck there because if you didn't sign in, you can't sign out. So they had to get a doctor to sign me out because there's no way I could prove that I am not a patient in that hospital. So I would get into all kinds of trouble doing volunteer work. Now, one of the things that I share with my father is whatever my passion is, I volunteer in that area. That's something that I would tell people, that if you go out there and volunteer, just because somebody's asking you, or and you don't volunteer, if you volunteer in something that your heart is not in it shows. It's never is going to work. And interestingly, my father is an avid tennis player, and what he did, he noticed that these ball boys, called markers, who would hit with these big tennis players, they had no place in the tennis world. Okay, but some of them were some of the best tennis players that anybody has played with. My father, for the first time, at least in Tamil Nadu, he said, you know what, we need a tournament just for those markers. So he created at that time and ran what was called a markers tournament. And the entire tournament featured marker boys and the men, and those days was only mostly men and boys, and they played a tournament to showcase their own talent. I'm not 100% certain if any of them became famous tennis players. So something similar happened to me, that I was volunteering through my company, and then I ended up going to Special Olympics one time. And I volunteered at the Special Olympics local state event and stuff. And I said to myself, I'm a table tennis geek, and there's nothing I love in my life more than table tennis. How about table tennis for the developmentally disabled? So I went and talked to some of their executives, and I said, hey, what about a program with teaching them table tennis? Oh, that's a tiny little ball. It'll run all over the place. You'll only frustrate them. I said, hey, you got nothing to lose. Let's start one. I'll bring the ball. I'll bring the paddles. I'll figure out tables. We'll give it a try. And we started it 1988 or so. I ran the program for 25 years in New Jersey. I was the only one running such a program. We had over 35 athletes who went through my program. And then I even forced them to create a table tennis event in the Special Olympics. And eventually, because there was no other Chitra who was running another program in all of New Jersey state, they shut down table tennis. They kicked table tennis out of Special Olympics. It was a horrible day for me. But anyway, a little bit about Red Cross is that all the technical, I thought when I went to Red Cross, which is my dream all my life. So I thought all I'm going to do is to show up in disaster sites and help out. But it turned out something very different. It turns out in Red Cross, people traditionally went out there and helped. Whereas now Red Cross has become significantly technology oriented. So you got to get familiar with some of their applications and be able to go online, enter information. And there's quite a bit of computer stuff that is really baffling some of these people who want to help, but they can't. So what I've become in Red Cross, among other things, is also a one-on-one trainer, helping a lot of even Red Cross volunteers to learn how to use the computers. So, I kind of, sometimes volunteering works as you go out and seek to do volunteering. Sometimes, as I'm running a Google group of over 500 people who all got laid off from my company, to help each other find jobs and figure out benefits and stuff. So volunteering is huge. Somebody once said not too long ago, when you live on this planet, you owe rent. to this earth, which you don't pay. You know how you pay rent to this earth? You volunteer. So one way to look at volunteering is you're paying rent for your living on this planet. Given that, now, I know I kind of have this couple of narrow areas of volunteering, I know, but every time I stop by and I talk to you, volunteering work that you have done is nothing that you have ever said before. So, how many hundreds of volunteer activities that you do? I think it must be in line with all the work that you did at Honeywell.
So interestingly enough, I did start out originally when when I started out in Honeywell, I was quite surprised that I was the fourth. Maybe there were maybe five other, no, altogether 5 women engineers amongst in that particular division, 100 plus. And I was appalled because I had just graduated from a class of what I call equal, right? There were 50 other women in my class of 100 who were, women engineers. And I was shocked and I thought, hey, I've come from India where, what happened to women's lib in the United States? I was quite surprised and went and asked the manager, said, where are all the women? And I didn't know better than to ask all these questions, but that's one of the things you learn is you have to keep asking questions even when you're not allowed to. And then they said, hey, one of the problems we have is that, in fact, then I think more so than now, it's a lot less. I think society is caught up and understand more, but I'm talking in the, mid 80s, girls going through school, by the time they reached high school, for some reason, they are considered not smart enough or no one encourages them in science and technology. So bunch of us women, the handful that were in that particular division, we corralled other women engineers we knew, and we formed this thing with the blessings of our respective management in the different companies. The who's who of companies in Minnesota got together and said, all right, we are going to create this group called Industry Volunteers, encouraging science and technology. We let them take time off during, workday to go to these schools and try and catch these kids, just when they start high school. So either a 9th standard or an 8th standard, and kind of talk about the kinds of fun activities we are doing as engineers, the kinds we think. And I remember in the early stages, the girls would be all wide-eyed in the class thinking, you're engineers? I never knew women could be engineers, And that's kind of how it started. Then that went on to, okay, now I see, we've got that seed going and we've got that part going. Then what about women engineers in leadership roles? So I started a women's advocacy group in Honeywell. We started, an Asian American advocacy group in Honeywell. I mean, yes, I was a rabble rouser. And so, then that went on to passionate things about, someone once invited me to be on a board of directors of a nonprofit for disabled people. And that started out a whole nother volunteer opportunity and thing that said, I want to speak up. I want to talk about getting equality, equal access. It's everything. It's not just for education. It's for, every little thing, not just physical, but, every little adaptation and what it takes and things like that. So that's kind of where it started. So then, fast forward, we moved to New Jersey. I have to start over. I don't have a community. So I look around and thinking, in Minnesota, I had a community. I need to build a community. So I was shopping in one of the small stores and saw another woman around my age and said hi and go start chatting, saying, I'm new to this town. What is there in this town? And she said, I'm also new to this town. And we said, hey, we need to start a women's club in this town, And then we talked about hidden problems that women and face and injustices, which is hence that whole concept of doing things for battered women's shelters and things like that. So that's kind of how I developed it, that this whole idea about, I'm very passionate about equality and advancing women's uh, causes. And of course, I did the march and, did all of those things in Washington, D.C. So that's where
Well,
it
speaking of
comes
the
from.
march, when after the big march, millions of women showed up in DC and we all just glued to our chairs watching the march. And then after a couple of days or later, and when we got to talking and you told me you were there, you rallied up a whole bunch of women, you rented a bus and you all got into the bus and you went to Washington for this march. I tell you, I don't think any words came out of me because I watched how it was and I said, Anu showed up in person at this march in Washington, DC. I think you definitely would like to say a few more words about your march. Would be very
Yeah,
interesting.
those were, yes, passionate times. So I was very active politically. And so we had started this group that was trying to do some advocacy. And then we said this whole Women's March movement started. I had reached out and a couple of interestingly enough, this group came together because my younger son used to be in the marching band. And this is the parent of one of his classmates. My son has since gone on to college and was actually working, but the point was we still kept in touch. And so she called me and said, are you interested? And I said, absolutely. So we went and talked to we went and talked to a pastor of a church. And we said, as church leaders, you guys need to do your part. And I said, we really need to do this. So he rallied, he did a Sunday sermon, got a bunch of things. His wife joined. We went and rented the bus and then took off on this 4.5 hour journey to Washington, D.C. And on the roads, there are buses and buses and buses of women. And you have rest areas to stop to go to the bathroom. There are only a few women's bathrooms. We kick all the men out of the men's restrooms and say, no, us women have to go. So yeah,
Oh my goodness.
it was absolutely both empowering, and also you really realize that speaking up makes a difference. So that's when our whole activism started. And Chitra, I kept at you about
Yeah,
voting and making a difference. And so yeah.
I know. Yep, I
So
didn't vote for a
anyway,
long time until I got beat up by Anu, and
yes.
I had to
So
go and vote. And since then, I have been voting.
yeah.
You
So
know, the highlight of my volunteer work is really 9/11, really, because I got roped into, actually, I should say, I was asked if I would be the lead for the 9/11 recovery for my company. So for the next 2 months after 9/11 happened in 2001, we dropped everything and 100% focused. One thing that I wanted to bring to this community was how terrifying it was those days. I had about 6 or 7 Indian members in my group who were Indian origin. And, after all the people in my group, they were the first one to ready to drop everything and go wherever they had to go and help out with bringing up all these telecom equipment. And, after about the first 3-4 days of them going at night and working in these parking lots, trying to get cell sites up and running, one day they came back, everybody was in my room. I said, Chitra, we need to talk. And they said, we can't go do this anymore. I said, what do you mean? I would be dead. I volunteered everybody to do this. And they said they were harassed so much because they all looked like Middle Eastern people. And they said that they literally feared for their lives going out to public, I don't know, gas stations and things in the middle of the night. So it was a very, that whole experience had a beautiful, the whole recovery that we did at the same time. There was also this dark side to the post 9/11, era. This pretty much brings us towards the end of our presentation. And so, Anu, what I would like you to do is be the first to give your final thoughts to these women that we are talking to as senior women engineers who graduated, moved on, especially you as a Bangalorean, if that's the right word.
It is.
Give your prime advice.
So I'll tell you, I looked at some of the questions and then, talk about when things come in the way of what you think you want to do, and how do you then navigate, and still advance your causes and your thing. So you have to understand that when uncertainties happen in your career path, absolutely. I mean, I don't know, but those of us who are married know these things that happen, that sometimes you have to move because your husband got a job, or in a different place, and then what happens to this careful career that you've built, where you were progressing towards becoming the GM of a plant, because that was my goal. You start over. Guess what? I found a whole new career in telecommunications. I didn't let it stop me. So, and I think that's the thing, is that you have to find opportunities in every path that deviates from the thing. And so be open to opportunities, and look to see what you can make of it. But if something is really passionate, you'll find that despite uncertainties, you can go back to it, which is what Chitra did. I think when she said, she started out in power again, even though she wanted to get away from it. Then she said, no, I'm going to find my way out of this once more, and did so. So I think that's the key. The key is to keep trying. And I think that's the fundamental rule of an engineer, right? An engineer always makes the best use of whatever tools are available in front of you to solve the problem. So think of everything that's happening to you and whatever uncertainties that are thrown at you as a tools and an opportunity to solve the problem. So and I think I live in very next door to Edison's museum, and how many versions of the light bulb he went through before he found the light bulb that actually lit the world. So just like that, we've got to keep trying. That's light bulb is what our goal is. So that's my 2 cents.
That brings me to my final word to all the participants. So what I wanted to talk, I wanted to just mention 2 things. One is balance, and the second one is friendship. The balance is, a long time ago, a therapist, when I was at one of the worst moments in my life, I went to therapy, and she gave me this wonderful, wonderful tool that I wanted to share with you. She said, you're an engineer, so I wanted to speak to you in terms of numbers, because you will probably understand this much better. Think of the energy that you have on a given day as 100. And guess what? You don't get 101. You don't even get 100.01. You only get a unit of 100 or 100%. Now, that energy is split in your life in many ways: physical energy, intellectual energy, emotional energy, psychological energy. But every one of us have a different balance of that energy. An athlete in the Olympics probably is looking at 80% or 70% physical energy, or an athlete in general. Whereas if you think about somebody like Visvesvaraya, Ramanujam, and all those, C.V. Raman, these people probably were sitting at 80% intellectual energy. So they had a normal life in that. So the energy, when you have your normal, like I'm into sports a lot, so I still have probably have a high level of 40% sports energy. So physical energy. So what it is she said, when you don't have more, what you have to do when one needs more energy, let's say you have an unfortunate loss in the family, your emotional situation wants more energy, you can borrow. You can turn off your sports. You can even take a few days off from work and not have the intellectual energy spent over there. But what you have to do is you have to figure out about getting back to your balance, or balancing why if you happen to stay in this borrowed state for long periods of time. So when you go through your careers, be aware of your energy balance. Are you in balance? And every night you charge up, and every morning you are ready to spend your energy, and make sure this energy is always in balance, and everything will really fall into place. So a while back, early in the beginning of the program, Manu was asking about this bling, because she said that because I never wear anything around my neck and I get teased by everybody. This is a bead necklace. Recently, my mom came over from my brother's house and to stay with me for a few months, a couple of months, which she's done for 18 years. But with all the COVID lockdown, my mom has been also one of the seniors who was significantly impacted. So the change of place impacted her greatly. There's a lot of things that she used to do. My mom and I did over 15 5K races over the years. She would walk and I used to run, and sometimes we both would walk. There's a lot of things we used to do together kind of was not happening because she was pretty distraught. So I found a number of things, and one of which was making bead necklaces. So I would design, and my mom would make. This is a bead necklace my mom made. My mom and I made for Indian Independence Day. That's why you have this orange, green, and white colors. And she really kind of liked the fact that it represented Indian flag colors. And what I did today, I thought about it a few days ago. I was lying around somewhere, and I said, I'm going to wear this, symbolizing the root that Anu and I share with all of you, having been born and raised in the Indian culture, and given all the enormous wealth and the women who made India what it is today. So I wanted to wear this to really celebrate our friendship across the continent, which leads to my thoughts about friendship. So my final word is friendship is so important. And that's what I have with Anu for the last 15 years. You have to build, manage, preserve, and cherish your friendships. You have to be there for your friends and reach out when you need. And speaking of the balance, there's just one more small item. Yesterday, I stopped over to Anu's house to go over all this. When I go to Anu's house, Anu, this is a surprise for you. When I go to Anu's house, she's usually very busy doing something. This woman never sits down. And when she's not busy in the kitchen or somewhere, she only gives me about half the attention. That is because invariably she is doing a puzzle on the table in her family room. And it's usually puzzled with about 2,000, 3,000, 1,000 or thousands of pieces. It makes my brain cringe and spin when I even look at the puzzle. But Anu does these puzzles on the side. And yesterday she got a puzzle that doesn't even have the final picture. She showed me a picture and said, guess what? This picture is not the final picture. It is actually close to the final picture. So you kind of have to imagine to get it. And here is something I wanted to show you if you guys can see. This is called the Burgundy Okra. I don't know what okra, ladies' fingers, whatever you want to call it. These are Burgundy okras. Now I grow them in my yard. Why am I talking about Anu's puzzle and my Burgundy okra? Because we all have to balance. No matter what situation you're in, there are things that you're passionate about. You got to keep them going. You have to have your little hobbies, your music or your sports or your gardening, your doing absolutely crazy puzzles. I think they balance you. Copying Anu and trying to do her puzzle wouldn't balance me. It'll actually throw me completely out of balance. So although I'm thinking about one of those, maybe I'll start with 10 pieces. But that's my word, is always stay in balance, because when you're in balance, the amount of energy you can put into each one of those, your components of energy needing activity, is going to be happening fantastic. So that's my closing remark. I'm not sure if we have time for questions. We are at 10 to 11. I'm sorry we took a little bit more time because we are both speaking about very passionate topics that we love to talk about.
Well, if you can make for time for some questions, there are a couple of
Sure.
questions.
Absolutely.
So one is addressed to Anu Madam and another to Chitra. So Anu, Madam, you've got a question from Anandi Madam.
Yeah, I
Can you
saw
read
about
it?
the design and the process, right?
Yeah, I
Right.
just
Yeah.
wanted to know,
Mhm.
usually, how do you represent your thoughts on design and the process?
Right.
And how do you promote and have reachability across people? And
Right.
yeah,
So
yes.
it's very interesting. So it depends. So when you look at if you want to think about designing for a product versus designing, say, a software thing, right? A product, a physical product you're building, there's a process design, right? And we've got, design for Six Sigma and all of those things. But really, when you think about a process, when I want to visualize and you want to get someone to really look at design, you have to look at it as not just what is it that you're developing, but how can you make sure that what you're developing is something that can be picked up by someone else, repeated without any rework issues, those kinds of things. And so that is the process thinking that you have to develop. And so you look at it and say, what kind of processes will my design need to have? And can I tweak my design now so that I can simplify the processes that require to build a product? And that thinking has to start at the design phase, really. Because a process engineer takes the design, right, a product, and says, okay, how do I now build this product? And says, okay, I need this particular, let's just say it's an electronic and a mechanical product. And I have this part, this is electronics. I have to build this little, physical product that electronic goes into. Someone has to plug it in. This has to get tested, all of those things. When you're looking at all of those process elements to build a product, then you say, the way this particular thing fits into a actual design, a physical product, and someone put the designer who designed the electronics didn't really think about where should the wiring come out of, right? And so it becomes a difficult task in trying to hook the wires on into the physical, the mechanical portion of the product. Now, had that person, as a designer, sat down with the mechanical engineer and said, okay, here's my product, here is the thing, here's what it looks like, here's my view of this design, how will it all come together? You don't just design and throw it over the shoulder or throw it over the wall and say, now go produce a product, right? So that's when it comes to physical products. When it comes to software design, it's the same thing, right? You think about it, it's similar concept.
So you have many hands over that product.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing such a wonderful journey. Both of you all are really amazing. And Chitra ma'am, and your volunteering things on Red Cross. A very good experience. We have learned a lot from you all. And also you told that we have to give more importance to our passion and mental health. That's more important for everyone. That's a wonderful message for everyone over here. Yeah.
Exactly.
Ashwini,
Yeah.
anything? Yeah. Yes.
I
Ashwini,
think
have any questions?
which was a question for me? You mentioned, Ashwini, there was a question, the
So
one
Sheila
about.
had a question for you.
Yeah, okay. I see it. How to manage making the transition from power electronics to wireless communication. Right. As I mentioned to you, here I was, keep trying and keep trying. I actually had several jobs in working on electronics, but the draw of coming to work at Bell Labs was way powerful for me to come in and join this extraordinary institution at that time. So I accepted it, and I was so shocked when I was told that I will be working in power electronics, part of Bell Labs. So what you have to do is you will have to find out where you go to what you want to do. For example, in my case, I kind of looked around and I looked around and said, who is doing what I want to do? Okay. So there were about 3 or 4 people who were doing electronics design work and doing microprocessor stuff and all this. So what I did, I jumped in, I made friends with them. Okay. I would kind of very gently, getting to know them. Next thing you know, I go show up at their desk where they're working on their thing, show my curiosity. I had no role in doing in what they were doing. So I went in, and eventually it one day when one of the guys that I was friends with said, he's actually leaving the company. And I was telling him, well, maybe I'll follow you because I don't think this job is working for me. I have to find something else. And next day, my boss called me and said, this guy is leaving and we want you to consider moving into his place. I mean, this is like, I think one of the biggest things that ever happened in my career is that they finally moved me into this microprocessor world that I was so interested, because I made friends with you. So what you have to do is, if you want to switch, just like what Anu was talking about too, and Anu has done so much of this, much more than I had, that you have to go, you got to make that happen. Nobody else is going to make that happen for you. Over the 30 years that I was a manager, periodically people from other organizations will just come over to my office and knock on the door, and they'll sit down. Hey, I love the work that you do in your group and I want to come and do it. And I'll talk to them about their background, and they would say, well, I know to do this and I don't know how to do this. Well, I'll say, why don't you go and figure out how to strengthen your background to come and do this work in my group? And that's exactly what they would do. When the next opportunity comes, I will keep their name handy and I will call them upon to come and do the work. So what you have to really do is your career. That's a whole another presentation that I have, that I presented to also in your region, is about career management. Nobody, not your parents, not your boss, nobody manages your career. Your career, there's only one person who manages your career, and that's you. So you cannot afford to put any kind of an ownership on somebody else and said, well, because I had a bad boss, because so-and-so, because of this. And life is going to throw a lot of dirt at your life over the years of your career. I calculate about 10 of those. My second year of engineering, my mom was practically at the deathbed. And if she had passed away, I don't think I would have gone to engineering. So I mean, life just kept throwing things at you and then at me. And then every time I have to pick up the pieces and turn around and get back on my feet. And I'm sure millions of engineers, that's how their life goes. So be ready for anything and just keep on marching along.
Thank you for that. Can I please request all the participants to kindly turn on their videos for posterity and just a document that we were here.
It's wonderful to see all the faces. Come on up, everyone. I'm going to go to my grid. Let's see who all we have. By the way, I also want to introduce to you guys my brother Ram Seshan. He joined from California. I told him about this crazy Region 10 WiE group that cornered me into this presentation just less than a week before the day. And I think the way I went after Anu to rope her into this gives you an example of how, if I want to get something done, you do it. So I thought about it. I said, Anu, this is your city and you should come and join me on this. So make things happen. And you guys are great at it. We need to see some more faces.
So I don't think it's, like
we're not going to get any more.
Yeah, so it's been nice actually having both of you speak, and it's been so nice to hear you speak as opposed to a regular, the 20 minutes and a 20-minute session where you speak, talk about your experiences, and then a Q&A. This, a duologue, as you rightly said, has come out so well. You've touched upon all the things that mean so much to us, and in the backdrop of Engineers Day and the pandemic, this has made us much more somehow, you have articulated all the thoughts that we had, the anxiety of, facing challenges. You talked about it so easily. Volunteering is something that we should take up to, balance all our energies. So thank you so much. It feels so nice to be connected with people who are, so far apart and yet so much of us. So thank you so much. It's been so nice. So I now call upon Ms. Pragati Baliga, our
Just a quick note. I do want to make sure I give credit where credit is due. It was Shanta Mohan, who's the author, who I'm a good friends with, author of The Roots and Wings, who told me about another event that I am planning to host with her in our WiE. She said, Chitra, instead of just people just getting up and talking, blah, 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 why don't you consider some kind of a dialogue style, which is also called fireside chat? And so I owe this to Shanta, and I already wrote her a note saying, thank you, Shanta, for the idea. And now I'm going to have to send a note saying that everybody loved the concept. Thank you.
Yeah, it's been nice. I mean, we could not even feel it was seamlessly done. So Pragati is our Women in Engineering Executive Committee member, and I would like her to place on record feelings today, the ones of gratitude for you people having made time, especially Chitra actually having transitioned so much around. I mean, moved so much around. Madam Anu and Chitra, it's been wonderful. So over to you, Pragati.
Yeah, thank you, ma'am. First of all, happy Engineers Day to all. I am Pragati Baliga, Executive Committee member from CEC. At the outset, I would like to take this opportunity to place on record my gratitude to IEEE Bangalore section for providing the necessary support and logistics, as well as WIE Chair Ms. Anandi Girdharan for encouraging the student branches of IIC and CEC with their affinity groups to conduct this event jointly. My thanks are primarily due to speakers Ms. Chitra Venkatraman and Ms. Anu Jayaraman, who have regaled us with their experience and enthused us to look at the great picture and contribute to the society with renewed rigor. Thank you so much to both of you. It gives me immense pleasure in acknowledging the help that we have sought from volunteers across the section in making this event possible by means of posters or literatures or by the support. Last but not the least, my thanks is all to the wonderful audience for the patient and energetic participation. Once again, thank you all.
Thanks, everybody. And thank you, Anu.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thanks a
all.
lot.
And by the way, the poster was amazing. Beautiful
Yes.
poster.
Yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't just see myself and say, oh, I got to
Chitra
raise
ma'am,
up to that.
I like your view necklace.
Yes, and I made
Yeah,
one for
I
the
like
United
that.
States colors too.
It's wonderful.
So it's wonderful. My 90-year-old mom actually is
Oh,
able to design sometimes and
yeah.
do all this thing with tiny holes, right?
Yeah.
I'm very proud of her.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks a lot. See you all
Take care,
again.
everybody.
Bye-bye.
And
Yeah.
good
Take
night to all
care.
of you.
Yeah.
Good night.
Thank you
Good
all.
afternoon to you.
Care, Anu.
Good
Take
night.
care.
Good evening, everyone. Yeah.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Morning. Thank you. Have a nice day, and yeah, thanks for being with us.